2018 basketball season. We completed successfully. We all made it through. Um, but I would like for each one of you to take a look back at this past season and just give me your single best highlight from the 2017-2018 season. And I tell you what, John, let's start with you first.
Who are you starting with?
John, let's start with you. What was your best highlight from this past season as a coordinator?
Well, I didn't have any coaches ejected except one for the whole season. That was a highlight.
Yes, yeah.
And that was the first one in about 7 years we'd had its coach ejected. So that was probably a low light. Maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Well, it depends on your perspective. If it's only one.
It was a women's coach too. Just
Yep.
so you know, Greg.
Yep. It was
No men's coaches got ejected, just a women's coach.
Well, I think that, like I said, depends on your perspective. Yeah, if it's only one for the entire season, both sides, that's a highlight. And I'm very familiar with that situation because I was on the game. All right, Eddie, what was your highlight for this past season?
Well, there were several highlights, but I would say first and foremost is that we had officials at every game that I assigned, and that's kind of the first goal that we look at. But so we had every game covered. There were some dates that was a lot more difficult than others, but as a coordinator, our job is to put on each of the games that we assign, try to put the best crews available, for each of our games. And there are, some very, very trying dates that we had to, reach really, really deep, into our staff and fill some games. So, but we got it all covered, and that was a huge highlight for us, especially. And I know I'm not just speaking on myself, but with all the leagues that Tony has, and vice versa. I know that's our number one goal as we set out the year.
Right. That's an aspect that I think that we can revisit at a later date, but that's just a reality from your positions as coordinators. That's something that you guys have to deal with. And I know it becomes difficult. Greg, from your perspective coming through this past season, what was, if you can pick out a single highlight from this past year?
Well, I think, ones that are closest to my memory here at the end of the season, certainly with postseason stuff. Everybody's goal is to work postseason games, and it comes down to numbers. There's just not that many games available, and I wish we could have all of our officials work some level of postseason, and many did at not just for the MIAA or the GAC, but certainly my opportunity to be invited to work by the NCAA at a regional and then at the Elite Eight was a highlight, and having the opportunity to evaluate those officials and move them forward, and also having an MIAA team and a GAC team at the regional, or multiple teams at the regional, and then having Central Missouri move forward in the Elite Eight and ultimately win the national championship.
True.
And have two of our officials from our two conferences work that game was certainly a highlight. I was very proud of them and the effort that they gave throughout the Elite Eight in the process. That they have to go through and the evaluation moving forward. So that would certainly be my highlight for the season.
Okay, good. That's excellent. Tony, Mrs. Stigliano, for yourself personally, what was your best moment from this past year?
I think number one is getting all the officials on the same page this year,
Hmm.
both in the men and the women, even though the mechanics and the rules, there's some differences. With the changes that they made in rules, it has not been easy getting officials on the same page, especially at Division II, Division III, NCAA, NAIA, and JUCOs. So it's I think that was one. I think the second thing was duplicate what Eddie said, is making sure that you have the best officials available for the games that we accomplish. And so working together as coordinators is very key to success at this level. A little different at D1, similar but in a different approach, and the JUCOs and the NAIA. So I feel like that the officials probably need to be aware that we work closer together than they think we do.
Right.
So I think those are the two items.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you all very much. First question.
Hey, Wayne. Hey,
Yes, sir.
Wayne. I was joking about getting the guy kicked out a while ago. Did happen. You were on the game, I think, as I recall.
Yes, sir.
But let me say this, echoing what Tony just said. If it hadn't been for Eddie helping me have officials when I was shorthanded, or Tony helping me with officials when I was shorthanded, I couldn't have said what Eddie said, that we had officials at every game. But fortunately, thanks to the way that we all worked together, I had all my games got covered too. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of Eddie helping me and Tony helping me, I'll tell you right now. And Greg, seemed like I called you a couple of times too, so I don't want to leave you out of that. You helped me too, so appreciate it.
That's true. And you know what? And that's also a very interesting fact that I think officials should realize is that the coordinators work together as a group. You all work together, you support one another, and you also, the most important thing is you share information with each other. And that's an aspect that officials should be aware of. Okay.
And I think,
Yes.
one more thing, let me add to that. I think the thing that's important to the officials to know on this subject
Mm-hmm.
is that we do work together, and I think sometimes our officials try to work us against each other.
Right.
Sometimes, I understand it's a process. They're trying to get the most games, the best games, and et cetera. But when it comes down to it, what they don't realize is that we all communicate because we all striving for the same goal. So I think once the officials understand that better, they'll be happier.
Yeah, that's true. That's real true, Tony. Okay, now, in support of John's wishes, here's the next question. If you had to think about it, what are a couple of key areas that you would like to see your staff improve upon? And Greg, can you take on that question for me, please, first?
Sure. I think we need to be better at resolving conflicts. That's the name of our game. At the level that we're at now, at the college level, we've got to be great communicators. We've got to be able to diffuse those situations that present themselves every time we walk out on the floor. So, having that ability to communicate and be the calming effect and diffuse those situations, I think is one that the best officials that we have, probably all of us have, are those great communicators and know how to, diffuse and lower the anxiety level of everybody involved in those situations. So I'd say that's one of the big things that I'm really going to emphasize this summer and always have, from the communication part of it.
Right, exactly. Does anyone want to follow up on that with that response?
Yeah, I would, Wayne. I think Greg hit it on the head. I think probably the number one factor in officials succeeding in this day and age is communication. They have got to be able to diffuse situations, not create them. And I'm talking about our veteran officials as well as our first-year officials.
Yeah.
It is across the board. There is never before have these men and women that put the black and white striped shirts on, they have never been under the microscope like they have now. I didn't referee under this microscope. Tony Stigliano didn't referee under this microscope. Ed Hightower didn't referee under this microscope. Everything that they do not only on the floor, but off the floor, is being watched. And when they get into a game, this day and age, whether it's junior college basketball or Division I, Final Four, national championship game, they've got to be able to communicate. They got to be able to communicate to coaches. They got to be able to communicate to players. They got to be able to communicate to table crews. And one thing that I think we really miss is they got to be able to communicate to each other as officials.
Right.
It solves a lot of problems out there.
Yes.
And so as we go through this summer, I am going to hire and fire and let people go or bring people on board that are good communicators. That's going to be a critical point because they have got to be able to communicate. They've got to be able to diffuse situations. The day and age where you just go out there and start whacking people, giving technical fouls, and saying whatever you want to say, do whatever you want to do is over. It puts us in a very, very difficult situation. So those are the type of people that I'll be looking at this summer.
That sounds good. That's very important to know, Eddie. Any other responses to that question? The next question. Go ahead, Tony.
I piggyback off of what Eddie and Greg said.
Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge also is that people need to understand the language of KLT. And that is, if coaches know you, like you, and trust you, you'll move along very, very well.
True.
It's when you lose any of those three. I think number two, Eddie hit it right on the head. I spend more time diffusing coaches on communications with officials than I even do about rules and mechanics. Very rarely will the coaches ever talk about what you did wrong on mechanics.
Right.
But what they will talk to you about is their approach or their responses or how to handle them.
That's true.
We can't tell the coaches how to communicate. That's an athletic director's job. That's a president of a university job. But our job is even more challenging because as communicators, we're responsible for that game to make sure it goes, moves, and finishes correctly. Mm-hmm. And I also would share with you that a lot of people are getting in to think about their communication skills or their body language.
All right.
And they're judged on that constantly. The other thing I would piggyback off of that I'm going to make sure that we work on, because I just came back from the National Mechanics Committee, and Eddie sat on that in the past too, is we got to get people to use the proper mechanics.
Yes.
Mechanics, it is violated on all levels in basketball, in college basketball. And so, as I shared with the committee, our job is to get everybody on the same page with mechanics and not just make up mechanics that they want or don't even recognize they're doing wrong. So I think that's another area that I'm work hard on.
That's true. That is very true. Eddie, this next question I'm going to pose to you, we've already touched on it slightly, and we've all kind of communicated about it, but each one of you have individuals on your staff that you consider to be leaders or crew chiefs. So what methods or how do you communicate your expectations of them to them?
Yeah, and that's a very, very good question. And the thing is that a lot of these officials that are coming up, even your middle of the road guys and gals, I mean, they continue to look at these veteran guys. Tony brought up a very, very good point. We're trying to reel these guys back in from a mechanic standpoint because they have been basically using their own type of mechanics, doing whatever they want to do out there. And until we as coordinators, suspend an official or discipline an official for not using proper mechanics, it's probably going to continue to go on. But, I'm going to communicate to my veteran guys now, or my top tier guys,
mm-hmm.
On the different levels. And again, I've got different levels on the Division I or different top tier guys on Division I than I do on Division II and Division III, NAI, JUCO. So, there's different levels of that. And still communicate with them throughout the summer. A lot of them will be with me at my clinics, as staff, and we'll be meeting on that. They've got to understand that, the things that we're asking these officials to do, it's not, they're not exempt from that. They don't have tenure on this anymore. They have got to do what we ask them to do and do it properly and do it the right way. And it takes a little time. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to teach an old dog a new trick.
True.
You saw it last year with a couple of guys on Division One. Eddie Corbett for one. I mean, he never ever raised his hand, when he called the foul or had a violation. And he looked like a fish out of water when he first started developing, putting his arm up or fist up.
Right.
But now, of course, he's retired. But when he finished, he was doing that, and that's proper mechanics.
Right.
That's what Tony was talking about. And so, I think all of us as coordinators have got to not give a free ticket to these top tier guys. Or girls. They need to be held accountable and are just like anyone else.
Correct. Any other follow-ups? Yes.
I'll add a bit more. Another pet peeve of mine is we have to teach our officials that they have to work together as a group on the floor for that game. They can't have their own identity. They got to leave their eye off the floor and bring their role onto the floor. And all three of them need to do the proper things. That's why mechanics are important, because then all of them have the same communication. I think in pre-games they need to, and I'm going to push this in pre-games, that how they're going to handle the coaches as a unit, not just as an individual. I think they need to be aware of situations on the floor where they communicate. They need to move forward and not worry about one official looking better than the other. But that goes on.
Correct.
About each other.
So is there
negative way?
Yes. So is there anything that we do that helps the officials who are in that position of leadership on every staff to understand that this is required of them, that you need that from them on a game-by-game basis?
Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that question.
Yeah, do we have a way of communicating that to the leaders on our staffs, so where they understand that it's required of them as leaders to not just take on that responsibility, but like you just said, to demonstrate it consistently with their actions, with their behavior, with their communication, with their signals, with their decision making, with their interaction within the crew itself, with their pregame. Are there any methods, or do we have a way of communicating that to them succinctly so they all understand that?
Well, I know from my perspective, every one of the games that I deal with are on some type of video stream. A lot of the games that I deal with, I have observers there. But there are a lot of games that I'm not able to watch. We don't have anybody to watch. So,
right.
It's a lot more difficult situation than what you think.
Yeah.
Making sure that these officials are doing what they're supposed to be doing out on the floor. I think it's gotten better. Our evaluation process, our observing process.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our games, like I said, are on video stream.
Right.
I mean, each and every night I'm watching, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, and I'm at home in my office. And so, being under the microscope is a little bit more out there than it's ever been before. But
right.
On a Division II level and below, it is very difficult to put together observer programs, evaluation programs, or whatever the case may be, because it all costs money. And I, coming from as an associate JD at a Division II school, I know how tight money is. And so, you're not going to get anything put into helping to develop officiating in the budgets. It's just not going to happen. And so you have to do something with observers. You have to do something with your own evaluations. And all of our officials, have to submit a report, and take those reports. And if there's an issue or whatever the case may be, you got to address it with the veteran of that crew or the leader of that crew. And it's a lot easier said than done, especially on the Division II level way.
Yes, of course it is. Yeah, it is. You're right. Greg,
Wayne?
Yes.
Can I, let me just, oftentimes as the season progresses and I've put together crews, as we get games under our belt and we move from November to December and December to January, I'll start to kind of get information from coaches and from other crew chiefs maybe about a certain matchup. And it's not uncommon for me to contact all my crew chiefs, day before, hey, let me just share what I've heard or any type of information that might be pertinent for the crew to have going into the game. And then certainly they will share that with the crew before the game. If I'm at a game, I'll come in and visit with the crew real quick before the game and give them an opportunity to do their pregame. But I will do that oftentimes if I'm on the road and I'm traveling morning of a Saturday. I'll just be on the phone for an hour, talking to all my crew chiefs, trying to kind of get everybody on the same page and just anything specifically about that matchup that may be pertinent to their game that day.
Wayne?
So
Yes,
and going back to Saturday, or to summer, I think that's vital for our crew chiefs who oftentimes work as our staff at our camps and clinics. They need to be educated by me, by other coordinators, what our expectations are. And oftentimes there are veterans. We don't put them in those situations unless we feel like they're ready. And we'll they're oftentimes our best communicators, on our staffs.
Right. Tony, it sounded like you had a question or a follow-up.
Offer a couple other items. I think both Greg and Eddie said some good things, but I think also it's a constant job that you have to do that every day.
Correct.
Number one, I agree with Greg. I look at all the evaluations, and then I take feedback out of those evaluations, realizing their parts. Sometimes the head coaches don't rate them, the assistant coaches do, and et cetera. But I think the area that is important to me is how they communicate with the coaches. May not be exactly what the coach wants. So it allows me to educate the officials on how to communicate effectively. Not reprimand them, but coach.
Yes.
Either they don't want to or don't know how to. One's a training problem, one's an attitude problem.
True.
And it helps me when I call them to feel what that is, because if they have an attitude problem, then I need to help them because there's something going on that I'm not aware of. Or if it's a training problem based on their personality style, then I need to communicate. I can't knows how to communicate.
Right.
It's a process. So, and the more success that you have at it, the better. I think number two, I work hard at making sure that our officials look at every video and what they're looking for. I think that's an area also that sometimes we overlook as coordinators about, do they really know how to evaluate a video? Like, a lot of them don't know how. They're more interested in seeing if they're right rather than they're wrong, and they're more interested in documenting why they're correct rather than what do they need to do to improve, and a lot of them don't know what to look for.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking this summer I'm going to spend some time putting in a little book about how do you really evaluate video.
Right. That's incredibly true, by the way.
Yeah, I checked with some D1 coordinators, and I'm not so sure that even D1 coordinators do. And so, and I think that we have more opportunities now to do that than we've ever had before. So those are some additional things that I'll throw out to you.
Yes, and I'm gonna follow up with that myself. I agree 100%. I do believe that video breakdown is a critical training tool for each individual. But I also agree that a lot of us are looking at specific plays just to see if we got that play right. We're not understanding the purpose of video breakdown. It's not the point is not whether you got the play right or wrong. It's how did you get the play right? How did we make a different decision on the next play? The key is building an understanding. And you're right, that's an element that's not taught very well to individuals. There are some individuals who are very good at breaking down film, incredibly good. But overall, as a community, it's something that's going to be, it's once again, it's time consuming, but I think it's important. And if we can start to include that into our training avenues, I think it'd be invaluable for everybody. The next question we've once again, that's why I love doing this because we kind of hit on things as we go, and the questions flow into one another. But the next question, Greg, if you can take this on for me, if you can share with us what methods or tools do you use to identify the areas that are challenging to an official or areas that they are struggling in, and once we make that identification, is there a remediation process?
Well, I think, just kind of what Eddie said. I mean, we look at film all the time, if there's a concern, and this leads back to my crew chiefs, if there's a concern brought forward by a crew chief that, hey, this person struggled in this game tonight, would you take a look at the game and maybe give us as a crew some feedback? I think that's less intimidating to an official if we're addressing it with an entire crew.
Right.
And maybe your focus is on one person, but we're bringing it to the attention of everybody. Hey, give me your feedback on these few plays, and then if you recognize, hey, it's a positioning thing by this one official, or it's a judgment issue. This is a foul, this isn't a foul, sort of situation. Then now you go to that person and be a little more direct individually with them to hopefully give them an opportunity to be successful the next time. Maybe give them some examples of different film, little clips that may be a similar type play. Here's how this official ruled on this. Here's how they got this play correct.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, and we hear this in pre-games, it's not the some of our best calls are the ones we don't make, are the no calls that we rule incorrectly by putting a whistle on it, and it should just be a no call. So we have to be good teachers during the summer on educating them on when our judgment has to be better on those plays that we don't rule on than the ones we do. The obvious ones are pretty easy for most of us.
Right.
So.
That's correct. That's correct.
Hey, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
This is Tony again. Another thing by watching video, and Greg has said, because I watch a lot of film myself, what you have to work on you hear the coaches say they're not consistent, and eventually you get tired of it. Mm. But in reality, when you look at games, you may have an official that night that calls it tighter than Joe's hat band. You may have one that calls it in the middle. So that's the kind of part of the video that you have to look at, because like Greg said, you have individual plays, or you mentioned, but then you have to look at the whole game. I mean, I've watched games where nothing's called, and the men or the women, whether by quarter or by half, for 8 to 10 minutes, and then when they do call, just get on. That's things on video they need to understand and pay attention to. And so that's a constant training problem. And so it's a constant coaching. It's, what do they say? The definition of success, it's a number of failures corrected every time. Eventually you'll be successful. And that's really what AD and everyone has said in trying officials that way.
That's good.
And will they put it in effect?
Yes, that's really good, really good. Mr. Hudson, can I ask you a question, please? John, are you still with us?
And again, I'm here.
Okay, good, good. In your leagues that you're assigned for, and currently, is there like a feeder program for your leagues? Do you have anything that you draw officials or you draw officials from? And if so, how's that process organized?
You talking about the process for hiring officials? What are you talking about?
Locating officials.
Well, first of all, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but my best experience has always been to see who's Tony's using, has confidence in, see who Eddie's using, who he thinks are good officials, see who Greg's using. I mean, I've always kind of looked around to see what was going on around me. I've been accused of making guys work too hard or get too high up before I brought them in.
Right.
But I don't think that's right. I don't think I do that, but I do tend to depend on other supervisors and at least I like to know who all they work for and what they think about them. I figure if they're working for one of you guys, well, then you think they're okay. As far as how we find them, past recommendations, not really a recommendation from a supervisor, but just seeing what their resume looks like. You know, the camp system is probably clearly the best thing we've got to identify officials, because there's a lot of sometimes people move in from out of town, sometimes people move into an area, sometimes they're coming up from the high school ranks or from the ranks of lower level than what we're supervising.
Right.
But I put it like this: I like to know what you guys think about officials. Wayne, I like to know what other officials think about these people when you're running a camp, when you're a supervisor at a camp. I like to know what you think. But at the end of the day, I try to not fall in love with campers at camp. This is my personal deal. I like to see guys at a camp, hear people say good things about them, and then I will be guilty of this probably. I've said to guys, I said, you know, you did a pretty good job. Hope you have a good season, and let's stay in touch. And they'll say, oh, you're not going to hire me? I said, well, I'm thinking about it. We'll see what we do. But my deal is I don't want to fall in love with a camper at a camp first time I see him. I did that several years ago. Eddie, you had a kid. Remember, you had a kid from Northeastern who'd been through the program with you and Dave Amlin over there, and is really, really a good young official. And I'm probably not going to be able to say his name, but his name was Jason something. And he looked like $1 million at camp. He was voted best camper. Right. And he was 6'2", good looking, you know, good body. Everything was good about him. He had good mechanics. You guys had taught him well. And he came up to me after camp and he said, well, when do I get my official notice that I'm in your league? And I said, well, I'll let you know. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And he said, I'm the top camper here. You're not going to hire me? And I said, well, I don't know. We'll see. You know? So anyway, I didn't hire the guy. I wanted to decide I want to wait and see what he looked like the next year. He looked pretty good to me the first time I saw him. Let's see where he was the next year. Next year, he didn't show up for camp. I said, okay, no problem. Maybe he's gone somewhere else. 2 years later, the guy was completely out of officiating. He moved on to something else. And my only point about that is I don't want to be the thin thread that keeps a guy in the officiating profession. I don't want to be the fact that I hired him, he decided to stay. If I hadn't hired him, he left. And I had that experience with this guy. And all I'm going to tell you is that I want the people who are loyal and dedicated and are in there for the long haul. And the only way to really find that out is if I fall in love with them the first time I see them, then I'm not giving them a chance to see if they're really dedicated, and for me to find out if they really want to be an official. Right. So that's my deal. I mean, that's probably not the best way to do it, but that's kind of what I do.
Okay.
Hey, Wayne.
Yes, sir.
Let me share a few things over the years. I mean, my job is to constantly track as they move fast, they move forward, both men and women. So number one, I have a great relationship with the High School Association in Texas.
Right.
And so I do everything I can to work with the high school chapters as much as possible, whether it be inviting some as a free scholarship. Number two, I work with some intramural officials, and I actually went to the University of Texas and met and sat and watched, and I've got some people from different institutions. I think next, your own staff can identify people for you. I would also say to you, believe it or not, coaches sometimes can tell you. I also would say to you that when they, like John said, when they camp, you can't really, we think we're good at identifying an official at camp that can really go, but I found out that that's not true. So now what I do is when they come to camp, if I like them, then I bring them back to another camp free. Take another look at them, and then I let them work scrimmages. They have to work 1 or 2 scrimmages in the fall. If they're not willing to do that, then you know what? I can't use them.
Right.
Somebody else can pick them up and be happy with that.
Right.
I also would say to you that your top referees can tell you a lot about officials. And so there's lots of avenues that you have to put into effect to attract. But what I've learned is camps do is identify. It doesn't mean they can work.
Correct.
And so that's why I put those other processes in.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. So in essence, we all have processes that we use to identify potential hirings or improvements within our conferences and our leagues, and that's good. Eddie, to follow up on that, what's your approach? How do you manage an official's expectations versus your perspective on their skill set?
Well, every official thinks that they should be working every game, and every night, every big game. I mean, and if they don't feel like that, then chances are they're not going to be very successful because they have desire, they have the want to go through all the processes that each and every one has taught, said on this call. But you have to put your young officials or your 1st to 4-year officials on the college level in situations that they can succeed.
Right.
As a coordinator, we really do an injustice to a lot of these up-and-coming referees when we put them in situations that they're going to fail. And it has happened on every level of basketball. And it's not the official's fault. It's the assigner's fault. It's the coordinator's fault. So, I like to make sure that, I've got guys that are just going to work November. I've got guys that are just going to work November, December. And then I got guys that will work November, December, and maybe get a taste of a conference game. And then I have guys that's going to work, throughout the conference season. And then I have another set of guys that's going to work tournament play. And it is a process. I think before you can move up to the NAI level, you got to be one of the top JUCO officials in your area. Before you move into NCAA Division II, I think you got to be a very, very good NAI official. Before you move into NCAA Division I, I think you got to be a top Division II referee. It is a process. It always has been a process. What we're finding out now is that these young officials, they want it right now. They want it handed to them. It's our society. Nobody wants to work for it anymore. They think that they, like John says, they go to one clinic. I don't like to call them camps. That's what you do on the banks of a river with a tent. I like to call them clinics.
Right.
When you go to a clinic, they think they go there with one thing in mind only, and that is to get hired. And that is the wrong reason. If anyone comes into my clinics and that's what they're there for, I just tell them I'm going to give you your money back. You go back home, because you should go to these clinics in the summer for your teaching, for your training, and for your development as an official. And I think we've lost that. It is a teaching ground. It is where, it is a school. If you're going to be a doctor, you you got to go to medical school. If you're going to be a lawyer, you got to go to law school. If you're going to be a teacher, you got to go to educational school. Okay? If you're going to be a referee, you got to go to referee school.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, that is the process. But we've got young people today that they, all their life it's all been handed to them. They don't want to work for it. And so that's what I'm about. I'm about the process, because the more plays they see, the more court time they have, the better prepared they are to do the job that we need them to do as coordinators.
True. So here's a question for the group. How do we communicate that process to the officials, to those younger officials? And here's the key, not just our younger officials, but sometimes our intermediate, our mid-tier officials that aren't aware of what's expected also. How do we make them aware of the process?
You do like Eddie says.
Mm-hmm.
They come to camp. Not camps, but clinics. I like that word. Clinics is you tell them when they come. This is not a hiring process. This is an identification, and there's a difference between hiring and identifying.
Correct.
And so I also tell them when they come to clinics. So some of them may be high school folks that want to try to get into college. I tell them all the time, you may not get in the first time. It may take you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but when you go back to high school, you're going to a lot of the skills that's been taught to you by experienced folks who have been through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with Eddie also. You can never beat experience. The more experience you get, the better it's going to be. And I agree also with a lot of these officials thinking they should be hired right away. I call that positive discontentment. It's not that they're negative. They have the wrong perception. So
Right.
May be incorrect from other co-officials or officials that tell them what they have to do to get in, and this is what you have to do, and et cetera. They, like Eddie says, I totally agree that a lot of them want to skip and go from A to Z without going through B, C, D, and E. So I think it's important to tell them right up front, and I don't think there should be any mutual mystification.
Okay, good. Gentlemen, I only have a few more questions left. To follow up on the direction we're currently moving in, how is there anything else outside of the officials' abilities on the floor and their athletic ability that can influence the decision to hire that individual?
Well, I would say one of the most important things from our what we're doing is our perception. Physical perception. They've got to be in shape. They've got to be ready to go. There's no substitute for coming in and looking the part. I mean, that's the first thing that anybody sees. And we can teach certain things, but it's up to the individual official to come in. If they come to my clinic and they're 20 or 30 pounds overweight, I have a hard time hiring them. Even if they may be adequate on the floor, they need to put in the work and realize that what we do, our profession, is partly perception. Once you've been there and you've gained the trust of coaches and they understand, that you're going to get a fair shake every night. That may not be as important to them, but certainly initially they've got to look the part, and what we perceive from our standpoint as coordinators, they've got to come in and look the part of an official.
Correct. That's correct. All right. I believe we may have lost Eddie. He may have driven out.
No, I'm back.
Okay,
I'm
good.
back.
Good. Excellent.
Yep.
All right.
And I was going to say something what Greg just said,
Yes, sir.
because I just heard the tail end of it. Looking the part, physically fit. We want our referees on the men's side to simulate the athletic ability of our players, and that's what that's going to do for you is just get your foot in the door.
Right.
But after you get your foot in the door, you still got to be able to referee.
Correct.
And we've got a lot of men's officials out there that really look the part, but they can't call halls. They can't do it.
Right.
But they look good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got some guys that probably don't look the part, but they're very, very good play calls. So, there's a little bit of a misconception out there with that. Just looking the part, coming to our clinics, in shape, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's just going to get your foot in the door. That's going to get you noticed.
Right.
Interject. Let me interject, Tony. My feeling is if they're not going to lose the weight, they're not going to wear the proper clothes. They don't have the right attitude in the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They're not going anywhere anyway. And so they should already have that. That's part of being a professional. That comes with it. You can relate that to doctors, you can relate that to policemen, you can relate that to fire people. I mean, you've got to have that already. And if you don't, then you're telling yourself a lie.
Right. Right.
Very good point, Tony.
That's true. That is very true. Let me ask you guys this question. What steps, Tony, let me pose this question to you first. What steps can we take to improve the understanding within the coaching community with what we do as officials?
Well, that is my number one goal constantly. I'll just share with you things that I do. I'm sure Greg. I make it an effort to meet every coach. Each year I pick out 15 coaches and I actually go, men and women, I actually go to one of their meetings and sit down and go through the rule changes, go through the basics of hand checking men and women, whatever it is,
All right.
and make sure that the understand ask questions. I invite coaches to the meetings. I make sure I attend all the conference meetings with the coaches and their athletic directors. I make sure that when I'm chatting with coaches, and I think people need to understand this, who motivates the motivator? Who does the coach go to complain and gripe? And who to going to go to he might say something to his assistant coaches. So if you think about it, I'm not only a coordinator, I'm a counselor.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time teaching, training, and coaching coaches and doing it the same way I wish officials could do it, so we could communicate effectively with them so they can trust you. Remember KLT, if they know trust you. So I think as coordinators, and I think Eddie and Greg does the same thing, and John, we have to coach the coaches. And sometimes they have perceptions of officials that's totally incorrect. I have this old saying, it goes like this. In October, or in November, the coaches are excited. In December, they have the Christmas spirit. In February, and so we have to understand what they're going through. Mm-hmm. And so we also have to educate them that the officials are good. Here's their background. Here's how they work. Here's how you should handle them. The same way what Greg said earlier, I try to work hard to educate our coaches, officials, when they go in and talk to coaches, how to prepare for it.
Right.
It's the same job you do with your officials that you have to do with your coaches.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's true. Have we considered, or maybe you guys have already done this, because I understand that during the summer, the coaches are just as busy as we are. And at different levels, there are different constraints as far as what they can and cannot do. Have we considered offering just an open invitation to all of our coaches in our conference to attend our clinics and our camps?
We have done that in the past, Wayne. We've invited certain coaches to come. I'll tell you what I used to do. The coaches that give me the toughest time in the conference, I invite them. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's important that they can see what's going on and they get educated. I know that at times coaches leave and they go do something else and they'll get back to me and say, man, I didn't even realize all of this.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's up to each coordinator and how they wish to do that. I've had guest speakers, both men and women coaches, come in and talk to the groups. Mm-hmm. things.
Yeah,
I
and
think
Wayne,
it's up.
Tony makes a good point, but I think when you start inviting coaches to, our clinics and our camps, they, especially on the NCAA level, they
Right.
have restrictions
Correct.
on what
Rules.
they can do and what they can't do.
Correct.
A lot of our coaches are at a lot of our camps and clinics that we're running, and they see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't think you're ever going to change this official versus coach perception that's out there. It's been, I've been dealing with officiating for 33 years now, I think it's gotten better because the communication's gotten better. I really, anything that I send out to our officiating staffs, from a rule standpoint, from a mechanic standpoint, from a play standpoint, our coaches get the same thing.
Right.
They are aware of exactly what we're telling these men. Whenever I send out a deal and say, we're not doing very well on traveling, I want the traveling in the post to stop. I want our center and our trail officials to start paying attention to pivot foots. The coaches get that same information. And it has helped us a little bit, because when we have a travel now that comes from the center position or the trail position on a post player, it doesn't catch that guy by surprise.
Right.
And so any communication that I send out, my coaches get the same thing. So there are no shot waves out there.
Good.
And I think all of that.
Excellent. Any other follow-ups to that question?
I think we do see coaches, at different venues during the summer. I know all of us go to not just our own clinics, but to many other clinics, and especially at lower levels, we'll see coaches there, recruiting possibly. Yeah. And that's certainly a time that I try to visit with them in a less formal situation. And oftentimes they say to me, hey, I didn't know that officials do this much during the summer. And so they have to know that we put in a lot of time also, and certainly through conference calls during the year. Just as Eddie said, I share information with them periodically when I share with staff as far as rule changes and those things. And then, I rely on them, kind of going back to a different question as far as giving us input on officials they may see if they go out to a high school on a certain night to recruit a player. If you see an official, I need to have that information, and hopefully we can, our recruitment has got to be better. Not just us as coordinators, but our staffs, they've got to do a better job of recruitment, and mentoring is another big area that I'm going to really focus on throughout the summer and in the fall, that we once we get our younger officials, we've got to give them some sounding board to be able to share, not just coming to me, but maybe in a less, not a situation that I'm going to, get on them, but, just give them an opportunity to talk to another official and say, hey, take a look at this play, will you? I'm not sure I got it right. I'm not sure I got it wrong, but, what's your opinion? And, I think that's a big area that we're maybe not doing as good a job as we can, because we're losing. I've had half a dozen officials already contact me this spring that they're getting out of officiating, or some may be moving, but others are just they're just getting out.
Right. That's correct. All right, gentlemen. Okay, now we're down to the last question now, and I want to ask it of each.
Hey, Wayne. I want to say one thing before you go to that last question.
Sure, John.
You were talking about coaches a while ago and bringing coaches into meetings. Eddie brings them into sometimes. I've been to meetings of Eddie's where the coaches were there. Mm-hmm. I've been following the ratings of the coaches in my leagues, particularly the Sooner, not the JUCO as much, but the Sooner for years, and I've tracked them every year. And I can almost predict and tell you what the coaches, how they're going to rate different officials, with a few exceptions, by looking at the win-loss record of the team and the coach that's grading them. And I hate to say that because I don't want to make it like I don't think coaches are paying attention, but I will tell you from, a lot of years of experience, even though I never officiated a game, unlike Eddie and Greg and Tony, where you guys are very good officials, I will tell you, I follow the ratings, and the guy that wins most of the games has less problems with officials and tends to grade them higher than the coach who loses a lot of games and has a bad year. He doesn't like the officials near as much as the guys that won all the time. Right. And that also was reflected in the phone calls that you get. Right. I had a men's coach a couple of years ago, was a first-year coach. Literally, first-year coach, had a really great season, 27 years old, killed everybody, walked into a good situation, won a lot of games, NAIA school, went to the Nationals, won the national tournament, won the whole enchilada his first year, 27. Mm-hmm. He thought that the officials were awesome. He graded everybody high. He never called me during the year one time about anything. Next year, started out, wasn't as good as he was. Right. Lost a couple of games early. Before Christmas, he'd lost 4. Started calling me in early January. We lost a couple of conference games. Fortunately, by the time he got to the end of January, he realized his team wasn't very good, and he quit calling. But that kind of reflects to me that I think people tend – now there's exceptions to this. Some guys have got coaches have officials they like no matter what happens probably, but I think they mainly like the ones they win with. And so I tend to keep track all through the season of what each coach's record is, or each official's record is with each coach or each team, and vice versa. So as I get later in the season, you guys know I kind of shuffle them around and don't always assign them as early as I should. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to send guys to games with teams that they've won with already this year. And if I've got a guy that's already lost a couple of 3 times with a team, man, they're not going to see him again. Whether that's the right way to do it or not, I don't know. But I will tell you that if he sees a guy coming in that he's already lost a couple of times with, he doesn't want to see that guy. If he's got people he's been winning with, he'll want to see them. That's when he loses with them, then he'll change his attitude. So anyway, that's my perspective, and I'm not knocking coaches with that comment. I'm just saying I think we're all human. Everybody's affected and colored by how do we do with this guy. When we win, those officials seem pretty good. When we lose, they don't seem very good. Right. That's all I got.
Right. And that's just reality, right? And so what I'm really getting from all of you is that this entire process is difficult sometimes at best. There is no magic bullet. There's no easy way to do it. Coordinating is a difficult process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
All right.
I'm worn out, and the season hadn't even started yet.
I hear you. Last question. Okay. All right, Eddie, let's start with you. If you could influence one thing within the officiating community, what would it be?
Give me that again, Wayne. I'm sorry. Did you say that was directed to me?
Yes. Yeah, if you can influence one thing within the officiating community, what would it be?
If I could influence one thing?
Yes.
If I could influence one thing in officiating, I think it would be for officials to understand the importance of their teaching, their training, and their development.
Yes.
And it is you're only as good as your last whistle. Mm-hmm. And we have developed a society and officiating staff that, they want to rest on their past successes.
Correct.
And in officiating, you're only as good, as your last whistle, as I said. So I don't think we've got enough guys. And again, I say guys because I deal with the men's side. We don't have enough guys out there, men out there, that want to get better. They stay status quo. They're satisfied where they're at. They got their number of games, and they don't want to really try to climb the ladder. They don't want to go through the process that they need. And that's on the JUCO level, NAIA level, Division II level, even on the Division I level. And so I just think that's the one thing that I would like to influence, the importance of their continued training.
Okay, excellent, Eddie. Tony, if you had the choice, what would be the one thing that you would choose to influence in the officiating community?
Well, I'm going to step out a little bit. I want to make sure that the universities, the presidents, the universities, the athletic directors, and coaches know the importance of having good officials and the work and ethics and values that they bring to the table. Hoping that someday they can make a little bit more money, have better equipment technology-wise.
Right.
I think number two, I'll pick off away. That every day they get up, they need to know that they should referee it like the Final Four of any division, or the finals of the NAIA, or the finals of the JUCO. They should referee that game that day or that night, men or women, to the best of their ability. I'm not so sure that happens. A lot of reasons.
Yes, sir.
Whether it be their job, etc. But if I could get them to instill that in their mind, that when they step on the floor, this may be the last game they've ever worked, and this may be, then it's got to be the national championship game. So if I could do that, and then the last thing is, as Eddie and Greg and them said, we need to really work hard on recruiting officials.
Yes.
Either through not liking it, or tired of being picked on, or not the opportunity not to grow, or even those who grow and move forward. So we have to keep in mind it's a constant battle. And as Eddie said, we've got to take the mediocre and make it better. And so that would be the other thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's good. That's really good. Mr. Hudson, if you had the power to influence one item, one thing, one element in the officiating community, what would it be?
I think I would like to see officials have a realistic perspective on where they fit into the big picture of officiating. Because I get a lot of guys who will contact me who will say, hey, I really want to work the SAC tournament this year.
Right.
Or what have I got to do to work the SAC tournament? Or what do I have to do to get nominated for the national NAIA tournament? Or that's what I want to do. And invariably, it's somebody who is so far from being there. It's like those are the only guys that ever really ask.
Right.
You know, they don't have a lot of savvy. They're naive, and they think, well, I'll just ask, find out. But and it's a difficult question to answer, because sometimes, as we all know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder when it comes to officiating. What Eddie sees, and Tony sees, and Greg sees, and I see, it may or may not be the same thing when we look at people.
True.
So my belief is that the best thing for officials would be to work their butt off, to try to be be as good as they can be at the level they're at, but to be aware. Sometimes guys that hit this in their twilight of their career or in the middle of their career, they realize I'm going to be try to be a really good small college official, but I'm probably never going to D1. Right. And they get over it. Some guys don't ever get over it. Some guys quit when they realize they're not going to make it to D1, or they're not going to get where they want to be. And I can't fix that. I wish I could, because everybody ought to find their level and ought to work hard to be as good as they can at that level. But unfortunately, that's not always the attitude guys have.
I understand. I definitely understand. Greg, from your perspective, if there was one thing that you can influence in officiating, what would it be?
Well, I think John's point was right on. I think our officials need to be better self-evaluators and be more realistic with their abilities. They can't, influence our perception other than, what we see during games or during clinics. So they need to do a better job of that. I think I would really like to be able to influence our staff to be more nurturing with some of our officials. I think we're our own worst enemy sometimes, with the, in reference to, I don't want to lose those games. There's always going to be plenty of games for people. We are in a profession where, eventually we're going to age out, and we can't work forever. And for the good of our game, we've got to be able to bring those young officials along, and us as coordinators have to do a good job of educating and developing. As Eddie said, that it's imperative that we keep those good young officials, and then when they do get to that middle tier, we can't just forget them and expect them to improve on their own. We've got to be able to bring them from the middle tier to our upper level of officials and into our conference tournaments, and give those, if they've earned the opportunity, we've got to give them that opportunity to advance.
Yes, that's good. That's excellent. Gentlemen, I want to thank all of you very much for taking the time out of your days to come in and speak with, not just with me, but with the officiating community as a whole. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being honest and straightforward. And I'm really, really hoping that this information will help somebody in their officiating journey. Thank you all very much for being here.
Okay. All right, Wayne, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne, for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it. Guys, y'all have a great day.
Yep. Same day, everybody. Yep.
Thank you, guys. Greg, thank you very much.